Hi, thanks, Gigi. I'm going to kick it off. We're just going to do another quick intro from all of us, just so you have a little more context about the work that we're individually doing. I work for the Bohemian Foundation in Fort Collins, and I oversee all of our live music events, which includes 2 venues that we own and operate, a 900 cap GA venue and a 200 cap seated venue. We also book a 120 cap venue that does free shows only. We have a free weekly outdoor series in the summer called Thursday Night Live, as well as a 3-day festival, which has 6 stages every August called Bohemian Nights at New West Fest. So that gives you a little context about what I'm doing up here in Colorado. And I'm going to kick it over to Eric next.
So yeah, I'm in Boise, Idaho, and Treefort Music Fest is a multi-venue, multi-day, multi-disciplined festival. And it was supposed to happen in March over 5 days, and we have postponed to September at this point, and also have a company called Duck Club and work with a lot of the local venues, promoting shows throughout the year, including like a outdoor series at the Botanical Garden here. So pretty in touch with that pressing need to figure out what the future is going to look like. So that's me.
I'm Chris Zacher. I'm the founder and executive director of Levitt Pavilion Denver. We're a 7,500 cap amphitheater located in Denver, Colorado, and we produce 70 shows a year, and 50 of those are free. I'm also a professor at the University of Colorado in the music business program.
Hey, my name is Dayna. Hey, Chris. My name is Dayna Frank. I'm the owner, CEO of First Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Most well known as the home of Prince and Purple Rain in the 80s. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary digitally on April 3rd. And we have 5 venues and a couple restaurants, and we do outdoor shows. We do about 1,200 shows a year, all within the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. The last few weeks have been consumed with my new role as board president, apparently, of NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, which is a collection of now almost 1,100 independent venues and promoters across all 50 states that have joined forces to fight for meaningful federal legislation to protect the future of the independent music economy.
Great. And Dayna, I guess we're going to start off today by just talking about the big question that's on all of our minds, which is when can we open and should we open, which are 2 different things. So do you want to start with your kind of thoughts about your individual properties, as well as what kind of the word is from the NIVAs in general?
Yeah, I mean, NIVA as a 14-day-old organization doesn't have like an official stance or any position. So just to clarify, like none of this is any kind of like official statements or whatever. For staff as an organization, we feel really strongly that we're not the leaders in this, that we're not doctors, we're not medical professionals. We're closed because of a public health emergency, because it is literally not safe for the public to have concerts and to be in our room. So we are closed. We're going to listen to the doctors. We're going to listen to the government. And when they, provide the instructions as to when it's safe to reopen and how to do so, we're going to follow everything to a T and listen to people much smarter than us. Sorry, that was like a non-answer, but like, I just like, I feel like everyone's asking these questions, like, when are you going to reopen? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm a rock club owner. How am I supposed to know this kind of stuff? I mean, so that's what we're doing.
I think that's totally fair. I think we all kind of discussed briefly about how we don't have a crystal ball, and I think we have a lot of hopes, but I don't know if Eric or Chris have any thoughts that they would like to chime in on. They're scared to be a futurist as well. Okay, Eric.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can go. I think it's really grappling with that, and I think that's one thing I'm really excited about the NIVA organization, is us getting a more unified voice, talking to leaders so they understand the needs of live events and venues a little bit better, because we're seeing guidance in our state that right now is leading to opening as early as end of June, but that may be at like really limited capacity. It's a little unknown at this point, and whether or not that's helpful for us is a little hard to read at this point. And it is tricky because a lot of these events are booked well into the future, and really trying to thus grapple with understanding that moving target is pretty challenging.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what Eric and Dayna said. This is a very challenging time, and we're not medical professionals or health professionals, so we're playing a waiting game and hoping that there's brighter days ahead.
And I know for us, we actually just this week canceled our festival, which is held in August. And there was definitely, speaking a little bit about the ethical and moral side of things, we weren't sure that we'd be able to do it based upon guidance, but regardless, we also felt like a free festival in the community that, could potentially, be dangerous to the community wasn't a good idea. So, I think there's also not only what the guidance says, but sort of the moral and ethical responsibility of having people congregate, not only for the patrons, but also for your staff. But with that not knowing, what about, how does that affect the economy of your businesses?
I can go first. That affects the economy of our businesses drastically. The unknown is an amphitheater. All of our revenue is generated between May and September of each year, and we have to generate enough revenue to get from September to May of the following year. So when you look at the income streams, they're already being affected drastically from a sponsorship standpoint. The on sales are being affected, and that really changes the way that planning works for not only the rest of this year, but going into next year, and kind of pivots you into more of a self-preservation mode than looking at an outlook of doing a large series later in the summer when we're still not sure if we're going to be able to.
And so I know Dayna NIVA is doing a lot of efforts to try and, save a lot of venues. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that when thinking about the future. How do we make sure it still works?
Yeah, I think the first few days when the shutdown, I think it was like Seattle was first on March 10th or 11th. Their capacity restrictions came in, and then I think LA and DC, and all of a sudden this, as that week unfolded, it was like information was moving so fast. I remember talking to a local government rep at our state government being like, what's the chance of this happening in Minnesota? And he was like, absolutely none. And then 2 days later, everyone's shut down. And so it's like, I kept reading everything that came out, just consuming information, what is going on? And every single article mentioned how much Live Nation AEG were hurting and how devastating this was. But they all ended with this little button that was like, yeah, but they have plenty of cash. And when they come through this, they're going to have so much more expanded market share because all the independents are going to go away. I was like, oh my God, what kind of post-apocalyptic music industry are we going to wake up to? And just thinking and who is it going to be? First Avenue, I think, is incredibly strong. And I think if anyone's going to survive it, I think we are. But, when we start looking at our balance sheets and our cash burn, and you start thinking oh my God, how can any business go 24 months with no revenue? It's just not feasible. And then I was like, oh my God, if we're thinking like that and we own our properties and we're in, really healthy financial shape, think about, the rest and what kind of fear that must be inducing. And so instead of getting depressed, I just started to be like, what can I do about it? And so, but yeah, it was those newspaper articles that were all like, oh, they're going to have so much more market share at the end of this. It was just kind of presumed, yeah. So, the goal or the effort is really the bigger independent promoters fighting with the little independent promoters, and just trying to protect our ecosystem and making sure that when this nightmare is over, we still have a music industry that we're proud of and want to be a part of.
Yeah, I think the overall outlook of the music industry when we come out of this is going to be much a different format than what we see right now. I actually think that you're going to see more independent promoters coming out of those ashes and being able to compete. When these large corporations have debt loads that they have, it's going to be, I think, much harder for them to sustain long term, especially considering that they exist to outside of the music side of stuff, they exist to return money back to their shareholders. The investment in those organizations is going to go down when there's no economic activity, which might provide a bump for all of us independents that are able to survive this crisis.
If we can survive, that's the key. I mean, I think that is like the name of the game right now, is like what kind of structure and what kind of federal support or philanthropic or if we as a group can come up with new revenue streams. I mean, we're focused on the federal lobbying effort just because that is the most pressing. And again, because we're closed for a public health crisis, the public needs to help get our businesses through this. I firmly believe that. But yeah, just as a collective, and, this amount, this type of event has never been seen before ever in the world. Right. But, and it leads to a group like this that's never existed before. And so what the potential is and what could come out of it, I just really think is endless.
Wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
I was just tag along. I think one of the advantages, to Chris's point a little bit with the independents, and I think NIVA leading this national conversation is locally too. We're just putting a little bit more effort into finally organizing our local venues a little bit more and being able to speak with one voice, even if we're very different from each other, recognizing especially right now, we're all very much in the same boat. And it's been, so I think from that vantage point, but also, just from local businesses in general, we're seeing a lot of that right now. But I also think it's really important for the live events industry and live music in particular to identify itself and to be seen. So, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, the phrase we're using is united in independence. Like that's the one thing we all have in common, we're across all political spectrums, across all musical genres, across all like sizes and demographics. But the one thing we all have in common is that we are not owned or operated by a multinational corporation.
Yeah, and so it's like seeking bridge funding, which I know is being worked on, but then also the storytelling element to it, which I think is really important, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's cool to talk to other people that have the same issues, right? Like, who wants to open up at 10% capacity? I mean, we all know the experience of a show underperforming in First Avenue, which is 1,600 cap, of having even having 600 people in there. It's just like, oh God, come on. It kind of sucks the energy out of the room a little bit. And so having to have every show is not, financially, it doesn't make any sense, but even just emotionally, bands don't want to play to half a room. I mean, that's why booking is such a work of art, right? Like finding the right size room for the right band at the right time and getting it in front of the right people. That's not a science. That is an art. I'm in awe. I'm not a talent buyer. I'm in awe of talent buyers because they're able to do that. But to have to just start off the gate saying 10%, 25% capacity, I don't know, man.
It destroys the economics of the venue as well.
Yeah.
If we do have to come out and operate at 20 or 30% capacity, trying to adjust for that within our bars, our restrooms, our egress points, everything else, it becomes a puzzle of how do you do this? How can you accomplish, our new reality? The safest thing to do is to wait until it's safe enough for us to do full shows. But how many of us are going to be able to survive through that, I think is really the question that nobody can answer right now. I mean, we're going to lose a lot of independent venues.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. I hope we don't. I really hope we don't. I hope we don't. And, I'm a huge supporter of NIVA, but we have to be realistic about the financial outlook of a lot of our small businesses. If we're successful in procuring additional funding from city, state, and federal authorities, we're going to have a much better chance than if we continue down this road we're on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just about telling the stories. And, independent promoters and music industry folks in general are so prideful, right? And independents especially, because it's war, you fight every day. And you're proud of it. And so I think it's hard for people to come out and just say, I don't know if I'll make it through this. How am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay, everyone's sitting on huge sales tax bills from February. Usually you don't even think about it. They just, you have the revenue, and now it's like, oh God, I can pay my sales tax, or I can pay 2 months of employees, and you have, property taxes coming up. And it's like all of these bills that, in normal revenue operations didn't even, seemed almost more like a rounding error, are now like monster, causes of panic and stress. And so, I don't know where I was going with that, but I just kind of brought it down a notch. Sorry, guys.
Well, I think you do bring up a good point. One of the things that, I'm most concerned about right now is making sure that I continue to pay my employees, whether they're working or not. You're only as strong as the team that you've built around you. And a lot of us have started venues and organizations from scratch. So we're used to being scrappy, but we've built our teams now, and our businesses can't function without the teams that are in place.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, that's definitely part of the stress of like, okay, so if you're an independent venue, you have no access to capital, you run through, the minimal PPP or EIDL loans or whatever, you're sitting here in August. I mean, the option is take out more personal guarantees and more loans for an indefinite period to get you through an indefinite period of time, or you just kind of shut the doors, furlough, and wait till it's over, or lay off and wait till it's over, at which point you have to come back and rebuild your entire business. And a lot of folks I'm talking to, Chris, like you in Denver, and Eric in Idaho, like have spent years and decades and like generations building up their local communities. And like, you get through normal business cycles, right? We've all been through recessions. We've all been through, 9/11, all of like the kind of normal ups and downs. But to have this like cataclysmic, just complete stop of our industry, no one's ever been through before.
Yeah, I mean, as all of us, I believe, are Gen Xers that are in the panel or on the panel session itself, we've been through a lot. We've had multiple recessions and downturns in the economy, and somehow we've been able to survive it. And I don't think that it's very easy to compare any of those to what we're going through right now. At least during the recession periods, there is a pathway to come out of it. We're not staring at 30 and 40% unemployment numbers. And, that lends to another point is, how is pricing on tickets, artist fees, drinks at bars? What is the reality of all of that moving forward, and how does that adjust down? Because if we're realizing 30, 40% unemployment rate, the per cap spend on each patron is going to go down.
Eric, I'm curious if you thought about that when you moved your festival. Did you keep everything the same, or did you adjust it at all?
As of now, around 90% of our lineup is intact. There's some shifting things with routing and stuff into the schedule. So, I mean, to be honest, we're treading water for like a month or so before we really toy with it much, because we have a decent amount of time and there's a lot of unknowns around it. I think depending on what the scenario is, we may have to analyze adjusting, capacities or various things. But as of now, no, we've kind of, as for ease, we essentially moved it in like 1 week's time. So we just sort of like, package it up and shot it into the future. And now we're just kind of waiting. So to be honest,
Hey, Eric and Laura, with being in communities where you're putting on festivals that are huge economic drivers for your communities, are you seeing your city officials reaching out and trying to help or assist you in any way in preserving what you've built to date?
I'll speak to that real quick. I think initially, yes, but then now it's like everyone is in need. But I think there's going to be a time when we get to a little bit toward the tail end of this, where it's going to be obvious that the live music industry is the thing still in a need. And so I think, that's kind of how I've been seeing that arc. And I know that a lot of locals here in Boise care about it, but also city government and state government. And there's a lot of, they recognize the value of it. So I hope they'll recognize the value of it in a few months too. So, yeah.
Do you have an economic impact study that you guys have had done?
We haven't had an official one. It's, so we've been in the midst of working on a music strategy for Boise in general, but, we haven't done any sort of, there's been a few things that have happened, but nothing. So we don't have that in place. I think Treefort's been kind of the economic impact study for the music scene in general, because they can see it. And there's some that like the the tourist department has done, but I think it's not as deep as it could be. So yeah,
that's a part of the music industry that, like, the story that we're not used to telling at all. And it kind of came to light, in Minneapolis, the chamber and people started calling, being like, hey, when are you guys thinking about reopening? Because, like, the restaurants don't want to open until you're open, because you guys bring all the business, and you realize, like, oh, it's not just our internal business, but it's our blocks and our whole, like, geographic community and also, like, musical community that rely on us reopening. And that story's been pretty effective with politicians. There was one Chicago study done saying that every $1 spent on a ticket in a smaller venue equal $12 of economic impact. I mean, that's pretty powerful. We're just not used to selling ourselves. We're used to, like, doing what we do and putting on the shows and, like, putting out fires. And so it's interesting to start, like, thinking in different ways we haven't before.
Yeah, the city of Denver does these economic.
Hey, Chris, you're on mute.
Spacebar not working. The city of Denver does an economic impact study on the arts in general over the city every couple of years. The last one was done in 2017, and end economic impact was $573 million to the city. So it's not chump change. And then if you look at it statewide, it's 1.3 billion, which means that we're producing more economic impact than mining or gas and oil, which are two of our largest drivers. I think the numbers are really important to dig into when we're talking about this with state and federal leaders.
Well, and I just want to add in here, I think we're in a fortunate position because we do have some music that we present that's free and some that's ticketed. And, we're talking about people's economic states, which I think is a really important part of what the future of live and what that conversation for the long-term viabilities of venues will be. But I also think it's just people's comfort level. And so I think we're kind of fortunate that we can hopefully, get people out in a free outdoor setting, hopefully. And that will sort of increase confidence in returning to all venues, because I think that's going to be an issue that, we're all going to face beyond affordability, which will obviously be something as well.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're all following what is happening in countries that are coming out of their quarantines and they're getting back into normal everyday to-day lives. And from what I understand, there's a lot of PTSD coming out in China. So how is that going to equate back to how we interact and entertain ourselves, moving forward? And it's another thing that we can't solve for, and but we have to be thinking about.
So I'm just going to do a quick note here. If anyone has any Q&A questions they would like to add, please do that now, because we're down to the last few minutes. And in the meantime, while we're sort of going through that, I'd like to just go around and talk about, like, who we all know the future of independent venues, and venues are pretty unsure. But with looking forward to the new live music, who do we see as the winners or losers? And I think one will definitely be local musicians, certainly in the short term. Because there's already agencies that are sort of thinking, hey, how do we start this locally? Because knowing that regions will be open at different points. But do you guys have any other thoughts on, wow, this is really going to be a big impact, and we're fairly sure to a certain segment of live music?
I'll take a run at it. I think that we're going to see mid-level and more entry-level emerging artists have a little bit of a bump, and we're going to see if the pricing models don't come down on the larger artists, especially the nostalgic artists like the Rolling Stones or Stevie Wonder, where you're paying $300-400 a ticket. Those days might be behind us for a few years, but it's a lot of it's going to depend on what is it costing those bands to get out and tour, and do they want to do that with no profit? It's going to be a hard thing to adjust for, because I don't think we can expect to fill stadiums for the next couple of years like we have been, and huge revenue drivers.
Yeah, I mean, arena's definitely the hardest hit, I think. And then, like what Chris said, the the super expensive tours that rely on $1,000 meet and greets and, VIP upgrades and depending on what the economy looks like when we come out of that's going to be really hard pressed. I think, Eric's in a really awesome position as far as winners, I think, is being in like smaller markets, littler shows, more like, I think personally, like the homegrown, like community builder, kind of like community anchors are going to be hopefully better off because people are going to want to support them. And I don't know, we put like Vans did a Foot the Bill shoe for First Ave, and it like sold out in a few hours because people were just like, how do we support you? Oh my God. So, I think those businesses will be winners if they can get through. I think for a matter of, it's hard to really talk about like who's a winner like at this direct moment right now. I mean, I don't know, Netflix and Purell, but like music industry wise, it's hard to see winners right now. But I think at the end of this, that there might be a new ecosystem.
Looks like somebody asked a question and says, how is this going to hurt jobs or internships moving forward with live music? I mean, there's no jobs right now. So, but, I think long-term outlook, things are going to get back up to speed. For every venue that doesn't make it through this, once we come out of the other side, new venues are going to open. This isn't a nail in the coffin for the industry. It's just a really, really bad sickness.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the big winner in this is live music. I mean, I think what everybody, at least me and my friends and everyone I talk to, the first sentence is always like, oh my God, I miss going to shows. Nothing like the live streams and the digital experiences, like nothing replaces going to an actual show. I don't care how cool the Fortnite concerts are or whatever. Like, I think that live music is, again, like, just like what you said, Chris, like gonna be the ultimate winner because the experience is just so powerful and so unique.
Yeah, and I'll just come. I think that for sure, and that coupled with that sort of that community grounded anchor, both venues and artists. I think there will be a kind of a rejuvenated like purpose, mindfulness around why we love live music, and at its core, that's why we love it. It's then commerce after that, So.
Looks like we have another question. Peter's asking, do you see it, perhaps more of a question, do you see it working, the two-way virtual audience experience working to connect artists with audience and venues in the new quote-unquote live augmented way? I can tell you that, Peter, that I think that while these live experiences online are really great, I don't think that they're a replacement for the experience that you get at a live show. That energy that people share within the venue, people feed off that, and it's really hard to do that when you're looking at a computer screen. Anybody else?
I mean, that's what we say. Somebody said that about movie theaters at one point in history too, though. I mean, yeah, well, we'll have to see like how, if our brains are all like so reprogrammed from looking at screens so long, how the human race comes out of this, that'll be interesting.
We have a festival specific question. Eric, maybe it might be best for you to see. What do we think the future is of outdoor festivals like GovBall or Lollapalooza once we are back? Seems mixed because outdoors is easier to spread out and obviously see a lot of artists live, but also these festivals rely on more public transportation flights for attendance, which may pose a risk coming right out of social distancing.
Yeah, I think to that comment, I think along with arenas and amphitheaters, I think big outdoor festivals will kind of be along the same guidance, but I do think we're going to see a little bit more of a local like regionalism for a bit, and people aren't going to probably travel as far for music. So even, yes, I think we have advantages being in Idaho for a lot of reasons, but 35% of our pass holders come from out of state, so what's that going to look like in the short term? It's hard to say. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. So it's a big unknown. I do think the festival circuit is going to be hit pretty hard for a little while. So I think we'll see smaller shows come back first.
I think a lot of the festivals were on year 3 or year 4. They were just getting ready to start making money, and they have to ask themselves internally and their investors, do we want to start over again? And being that a lot of the festivals are controlled or owned by the major promoters, a lot of it's going to depend on their financial ability to keep those going. But I think we'll see a contraction.
I think we were already seeing that in a lot of ways over the past few years. So it's just going to, push that forward. But so many of the larger ones that are well known, like GovBall, Lollapalooza, and certainly ones that are backed by Live Nation, will probably be able to make it through pretty well. And fortunately, there's less. It's owning a venue is much more difficult right now than canceling an event. Yeah.
Not just owning 5.
No, I completely understand that. So I think there will be more. Yes, it'll be a longer time until they can come back, but I think the resilience is not maybe going to have to be so strong in that time frame.